Hey, Sporty Spice.
Hey Peter, how goes it?
Where you heading?
I'm headed to Long Beach Island, New Jersey, and got a really late start. So I'm heading out now.
You're going to New Jersey.
I am, yeah. Got a solid 9 hour drive ahead of me.
Wow. What's in New Jersey?
It is an immersion, a seminar or workshop,
Yeah.
marketing and business development related event.
Nice. And it's tomorrow.
It starts tonight and runs until Sunday. Four solid days of group influence. So this is through Unblinded. Are you familiar with Unblinded? It's related to medical revenue recovery in a way, and it's
I only know it from what you've shown me.
okay. So it's marketing, business development, and every quarter there's a focus on different things. So right now the focus is group influence. So system mergers, speaking events, how to grow your impact, your business, and all things related.
Nice.
Yeah, it's not until the moment where I get in the car and I'm on the road where it's a good thing. Leading up to, I'm always thinking, oh, all these things have to get pushed down, or I'll be missing this. But I really appreciate the long, quiet drives to just sit, think, listen to podcasts, music, notes I flash myself over.
Nine hours of solitude. Well, you definitely
Yeah,
look like Sporty Spice, so you got that going for you.
thanks.
Hi,
Yeah,
Simon. How are you?
Good, Peter. How are you guys doing?
We're good. Did you get my email?
I did. Yeah, I just had a look at it this morning. Looks like a cool group of people. Thanks for the referral.
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of physical training that most people haven't really thought about. So
Mm.
it's always good to see what other people are up to.
It's neat. Yeah, it was really interesting. I haven't heard of them before. I mean, not to say that they're not doing amazing things, but it's never crossed my desk before.
No, I think the impression I get from Andrew is Canada is very medical kind of based, so in the US, there's just so much more volume of humans looking for, different modalities, right?
good thing you, Simon. What was it? What's that you're talking about, Peter?
Just the anti-fragility training and the um standing meditation, mind boxing, all this kind of idea. It's all from the fighting arts, about creating new neural pathways through training, so physical training.
Yeah,
So
interesting. 2 nights
yeah,
ago, I was reading about the mental resilience and the different neuroplasticity benefits of martial arts, and then even the differentiation between striking arts versus more ground techniques and that style. And it's really interesting in terms of the benefits and
yeah,
relating to traditional Chinese medicine or our meridians and then chakras. So everything linked together, but the resiliency aspect was really a big deal.
they might have had it figured out a few thousand years ago.
Yeah, yeah. And I come back to that quite a bit in terms of anything that was done for centuries or millennia. There has to be value in why it was done.
Yeah, yeah, we're good at the, oh, it's not science based, well, therefore it must not be worthy. Simon, what's the organization you're doing becoming the ED of?
So I'm not the ED. I'm the director of operations, and it's at Warrior Health.
Warrior Health. Got it. I had it, but I lost it. There it is. So does that mean you're leaving City of Toronto, or is this an addition to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm leaving the city.
You had enough of
Yeah, you know how that is. You know how that goes. You were a paramedic, right? Like you get the whole we all know how uniform life is too. It's like, yeah, no, I'm good, thanks.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it loses its appeal pretty quickly, doesn't it?
Pretty quickly.
I think there's only so much of seeing how the sausage is made that you can take.
What's that?
There's only so much of seeing how the sausage is made that you can
Yeah,
take.
100%. 100%.
That was reminds me of the different moments in my life.
Introducing the New Warriors Canada core trauma concept. A 2-hour modularized program that introduces first.
So Simon, is there anything that you want to help with or to talk about today?
I'm happy to help, but I'm not sure about what I want to talk about per se. I'd rather kind of listen and join in if that's okay. I do have to get out at 12:30 though. I apologize for that.
Yeah.
They just joined. So I remember last week with Kathleen, we were going to dig into, I think, was it housing related matters? I don't know if she's on, or was it specific to modular? If not, I know what's top of mind for me is everything that Carney's announcing in terms of domestic investment towards innovation and business growth and thinking of dual use companies and the application of that and where the resistance like materialize in terms of that money not either going to the right places or not being used in the most beneficial way to lead us down the road towards economic sovereignty. And I don't know if you guys have thought about any of that, but would love to hear your thoughts in terms of what you're thinking when you're reading the headlines popping out. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah. I'm just looking at their website. I'm trying to find a list of all the things he wants to fund.
Yeah. And Peter,
You know something, something that pops out for me, and it came out of a conversation I had with a colleague socially around biomimicry, and it's this idea of quantum computing and AI, and I think like we're spending a lot of resources on these topics, but I always think like, are we actually applying pressure in the right place? Like, should we be applying pressure on what's trendy or what's trending, or should we, realize that we're such a small part of that? Why don't we put our resources in something that we can actually dominate and own? So if you think about, what are Canadian resources that could be, that could be exploited to our benefit, as opposed to, spending a shitload of money on data centers and AI and quantum computing, when you see the dollars that are going into them in other countries.
Absolutely. I don't think that there's enough consideration or strategy around our competitive advantage and looking at mining minerals, and as opposed to running the same race as everyone else.
So I'm not wrong.
No, and I actually met someone yesterday that belongs to an organization called AIoT. And there's another I don't know what they call these organizations, if they're like CCI, but there are these conversations happening, and it's a mix between federal politicians along with industry leaders in the space of AI. So that's good to know, as opposed to just a bunch of people getting together with bright ideas.
Yeah. Yeah, we know there's going to be university research in it, but is it actually going to commercialize?
And that's what it all comes down to, is it going to commercialize? And can you share, Peter, your commercialization as a service model and how that could apply in any of the industries we're talking about, if it is energy and resources, or if it's AI and tech?
Yeah, so Simon, for your benefit, as well as just bringing Anish back up on this, I was on a task force for the government, and it was a wash. The thing was actually a bit of a joke, but what I got out of it, what I gleaned out of it, is I realized that venture capital isn't competitive in Canada. So if you use venture capital, you're really going to sell to a multinational as an early exit. And that's the trend. Like, if nobody really wants to do that research, but it's the truth. And then the other one was, I realized there was no incentive for parents to encourage their kids to be entrepreneurial. And, we're really a society of educated people. And so I thought, okay, so venture capital doesn't work. It just creates economic leakage. And we're not really a country of entrepreneurs. There's no incentive. And I'll add the caveat, a lot of Canadians don't realize that the US is actually a third world country, because they see what Hollywood lets them see. And until you actually work or travel, in West Virginia, you can draw a straight line to places like, emerging countries like Africa and so forth. But so that's one of the issues. Anyway, so I started working on this idea, and where I landed was, we really have to get away from venture capital. So it has to be really private equity or long-term capital reimagined, that can actually reach upstream. So using kind of a venture capital mindset with a private equity legal entity to be able to actually reach up, I would argue, all the way up to technology readiness level 2, but definitely pre-IP, pre-revenue, to actually pull down with a sense of urgency anything that's of value. And so we have to get away from venture capital to do this. And then the other piece that I realized was that there's a thing called a venture studio, which is basically supporting entrepreneurs with back office services like lawyers, accountants, and so forth. And I thought, no, we got to take that one step further, because what we have is we have a country that's rich with general scientists, researchers, and a country that's overpopulated by underemployed business people. You would fit into that category with your MBA. And so how do we put those together? And that's where I came up with the idea of a venture builder. And the idea is actually following a pretty simple algorithm that gets things down into the commercialization quite quickly. And this could be applied to anything and anywhere in the world. And the difference is you're adding a different stream to it. And so what I'm saying is, leave the entrepreneurship, venture capital stuff. It can stay doing what it does, but we need to create another complementary path where somebody that doesn't identify as an entrepreneurial founder, that still wants to monetarily benefit from their idea, but is willing to give up the governance control for that benefit. And then you'd actually bring in a team to accelerate it or kill it, because we have there's a lot of conversation around the shred credits right now. And one of the issues I haven't seen much conversation about is we have a lot of companies that basically shouldn't be functioning, that are surviving on government shred credits. But the problem with that is they're meeting payroll, but they're actually taking up our limited resources, human resources, by keeping those, say, junior developers in play when they should go work for another company or another startup. So it's called commercialization as a service. And I've just been evolving this idea. Now, what's interesting about this is not one public servant, elected official, have ever asked me what's it about. Like zero. And so that kind of tells you, what's going on in the, in the real world, when nobody says, hey, this is interesting, let's go and, let's ask some questions. Not once has somebody reached out to me.
Why do you think that might be?
It's hard work. They don't understand it, and they're supposed to be seen as the experts. Venture capital's fun. It lets you travel to New York and Boston and Silicon Valley. I just don't. I think it competes with the power brokers, the Jim Basellis and Mark Raffio, or I think that's his name. Those guys are venture capitalists, so they want things to reach their level of venture capital, as opposed to actually being a sovereign economy. And so there's a bit of misunderstanding in their thesis, which is the Canadian innovators. Yeah, people, they're, what is that saying? Sometimes their paycheck is so they don't understand something. I think the thing I learned recently, talking to the CEO of Innovate BC, Peter Cowan, his job isn't to serve entrepreneurs and innovation. His job is to serve the deputy minister and the minister. And that became really clear. And it's no fault of his. That's a systemic issue. So he'll lose his job if he suddenly, goes rogue and says, I'm here to support entrepreneurs. They'd fire him. So he's kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, which I found really interesting, because, it shows that all the money we're putting into innovation is really a clandestine public relations campaign for the political party in power at the time. And I'm sure you could prove that if you wanted to.
So if that's the case, who would you say would be the top winners, or all the winners, for commercialization as a service?
Yeah, what I've learned, because this came out of a task force, I just assumed the government. I was naive about how the government operated. And what I've realized is the same person that donates large amounts of money to universities to put their name on buildings, it's those family offices that need to be, engaged. So in my mind, and it's different in each country, but in Canada, these donors in Toronto and Montreal, that we see their names everywhere, and we all know who they are if we think about it for a minute. It's getting them to realize that they want to pioneer new ideas, and they have the social capital to to engage. So it's really up to a family office to decide they want to introduce this kind of funding and get it going, and then use their political leverage to to actually influence the universities and the government. So like Jim Baselli would come to mind, the BlackBerry guys, but it would mean they'd have to change their personal thesis on money and investing. But that would be somebody that, if he actually put his money where his mouth is, this would be something that he could actually do. So it, and whether you like it or not, wealthy people have the power. So you've got to engage the private capital to unlock the public capital. Because I thought the government would lead this, but I realized, and again, based on these $5 billion, response funds that isn't how they think. They're not proactive, right?
And I don't know how familiar you are, Peter, with the characters in family offices and what they're after. Do you have any exposure on that and the relationships with the universities?
Just very surface level, but I mean, I know, I kind of have started to map out, what external relations at universities do, what family office conferences, and it's all socialized, right? I mean, that's the thing. Like it's you'd be better off joining a golf course than or going yachting than anything else. I mean, all those organizations, they schmooze, right? Like they all have boxes at the stadiums, and the universities take people out for lunch and convince them that their social capital can be attached to putting their name on a building.
And that was my next question, is what is the carrot for them? And they've got the money, they've got the time freedom. What's that extra item they want? The prestige and having their name on things.
Yeah, I think in this case it's pioneering productivity. So it's basically saying, we're going to start an investment fund that will do X, and will prove the model out.
Okay, that's helpful for me. And just understanding more of the entire ecosystem and money. Where's it going? Understanding the influence of policy and government investment. That helps.
Yeah, and I think, when you're thinking about this stuff, like, you can either build a new model, which would be the family office supported one, or you can think about, like, you can't change thinking overnight. So like, if you look at all his strategic response fund, so much of what they're doing is about protecting the tax base and keeping incomes going. So like, they'd rather put money into industries that employ a lot of people. Like, it's all about employment. Like, I think that is worked for the government for a long time, but I don't think it works anymore, and nobody's been able to offer them an alternative. But it feels like so much of the work they do is around keeping people employed.
I guess as one of the main economic indicators is inflation or CPI and employment rate.
Yeah.
Which is what makes them look good or bad. And chasing after AI. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, the other interesting piece to all this is the procurement side.
And yeah, what about it?
Well, if somebody asked me, I'd say you need to do a leakage analysis. So they're saying, we need to keep those jobs in play. The ball we want to back up is softwood lumber, like, it's all politically motivated, and so then now we're going to build public facilities with, mass timber, and it doesn't mean it's the right approach. Whereas I'd say, why don't you look at what we import into the country and then use business cases to see if we can actually manufacture domestically, and I think that economic leakage is analysis is really missing, because getting government to procure steel and wood that's just moving the ball forward, right? It has to be something bigger or better than that. So yeah, I guess there's two things going on. There's holding the status quo and then also inventing the future. But I'd be curious if they're actually doing real procurement, like if they're just picking off the low-hanging fruit for political benefit, right? Like, are they willing to pay extra for Canadian labor? And I guess canola, that's a big one. Like, what was the thing they were trying to do? There was a trade-off to get the canola tariff removed. They were giving something, I can't remember now. But yeah, all they seem to be doing is moving the ball forward as opposed to actually building a new model.
That leakage analysis and gap analysis you're right. But nothing you hear about what we could start doing domestically. I can't remember if I shared this with you. Yesterday or the day before, I was looking at the demand forecast for all things related to the military, from weapons to supplies to rations, and looking at the gaps that exist in Canada and the US. And they're there. I'll share that. I'll dig that up and share that with you, Peter, because that was just a good target to focus on. Is where's the demand going to be? What companies or industries need support? What has to be done within our borders? What can be imported?
Yeah, I'm just reading their website. It all seems to just be politically motivated.
Website that.
Hmm?
Which website is that? Is that the AIoT?
No, the Prime Minister of Canada Strategic Response Fund listing all the money. And then there's stuff like a workers dashboard, a new nonprofit advice, like it's just all the same stuff, right? And I'm sure it's all well, documented and researched that this is what voters respond to, right? Like, I'm sure what we're talking about is probably very difficult to do politically.
Right. Yeah, that's what it comes down to, I think, is I'm always going to think who's incentivized to follow the money as opposed to for decisions, why it's made as opposed to what makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, so strong confidence workforce is the first sentence of the document. So to the government, it's all about the workforce. At some point, it's going to collapse, right?
Yeah. I'll have to dig into that when I get a chance, just to really see what the plan is and see what others are saying as well.
But yeah, I think if you have access to that, what they're buying, that's a really good start, right?
Right. Yeah.
I don't
Well,
know.
I think that. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I don't know about a lot of it, but I know in healthcare, I'm sure 90% of healthcare procurement is coming from outside of Canada at this point. So that, to me, that's the low hanging fruit, right? We have a publicly funded healthcare system that we control. Why wouldn't you do an analysis on healthcare procurement? And I'm not saying that you can replace, physio control and Siemens and but you can sure think about it. Like what is the ability. I know I have a friend that built a ventilator using outdated Canadian patents during COVID. The government gave them money to do it, and and it never reached the ground. But they were giving away these grants to look at Canadian procurement during COVID, and I guess the ventilators, they thought they needed more of them. But yeah, so there, I think those are, and one of the things that I watched, during my career was the purchasing became so disassociated with the practice that things as simple as stainless steel instruments, when I first started, were coming from Germany, and they worked and they lasted, and by the end they were coming from Pakistan, and they were disposable. You used them once and got a new pair, and so it's interesting, how the quality was what was compromised. But from a procurement point of view, 4x4 gauze is all it said, so they got 4x4 gauze, but it came from Pakistan, not from Wales. So yeah, it was kind of interesting how much quality was compromised in that process. And if you talk to the purchasers, they just washed their hands in it. Quality wasn't their responsibility.
Stopping was then have to make it work.
Yeah.
Without any additional feedback.
Well, and then to add salt to the wound, no pun intended, it got worse, because then the frontline workers had to write up, multi-page business cases on why they needed a more expensive product. It was up to the end user to justify. It's like PPE, can you imagine being asked to write a 5-page document on why, your PPE should actually be name brand? My pet peeve is workplace first aid kits. They all started coming out of China. And if you ever pull out one of the face masks, for doing mouth to mouth, there's literally no protection. But because people never use them, they just sit on a shelf. Nobody ever questioned it. But they're not Health Canada approved, even though every government agency in Canada has one of those kits in every office. And if somebody actually used one, they get a transmittable disease if it wouldn't protect them in any way. But that's the kind of stuff where I just was like shaking my head thinking, okay, this is getting worse by the day. So yeah, that'll be interesting for the procurement piece to combat quality versus price.
Terrible.
But I think everything they're doing currently is still just political.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm really curious about is what's driving the decisions that are being made and understanding it so that it makes sense. And you can forecast what is come. Yeah, interesting. That's without Kathleen and getting into modular, there's nothing else that I wanted to discuss. Is Simon still there, or did he take off?
No, Simon's here.
Yeah.
Okay. It pop up in your mind, Simon, as you're listening.
Sorry, I can barely hear you, buddy.
Oh, sorry. I was asking if anything else came up as Peter was explaining all these different things.
No, just the general thought about needing to stimulate Canadian business. We talked about SMBs a little bit last week too, and yeah, I mean, we can't all be telecoms employees or public sector employees, or you know what I mean? Like there's gotta be something else. So, and the world doesn't need another app. So what does that leave us with, right? Like, and I wonder if maybe something to talk about in the future. I don't know what you guys are interested in, but like space is pretty interesting to me, right? Why are we not? We were space leaders. We built the Canadarm. Like, we're pretty good at that stuff. There's a Canadian who's going to fly us back to the moon. Like, we're pretty good at this. So why are we not spending more time talking about space as a country, right? Lunar Gateway's a thing, right? You know who's focused on space? China. They've got their own space station. They've got a probe on the far side of the moon. They've got a rover. They're talking about building nuclear powered bases so they can launch deep space missions. Like, China's got their eyes on the prize. And they're talking about resource extraction from like asteroids and stuff in quantities of value that we can't even comprehend. So
Yeah, we're asleep at the wheel, aren't we?
yeah. You got a bunch of people with business and tech and engineering and resource backgrounds in this country, and it's like, there's your lead mark right there. That's all that stuff. That's the new Franklin expedition, right? That's deep space is. Anyway, that's my thought.
But again, that kind of goes back to that we're not being proactive, we're just being reactive.
100%. We've no imagination as a
country. Yeah. Which should be fine if we didn't have such a big government, you know, and that's what I always try and remind people. Like, they're like, well, that's not government. It's like, well, in Canada, they are the biggest business. Like, they either need to be smaller or get in the game, but you can't have both, you know, and, you know, and I think people, you know, people get upset when I talk like that. And I understand that's upsetting, but, you know, healthcare is our largest industry. Let's figure out how to do it properly, you know. We can't wait for private companies to do space tech, you know. We need to do it as a, you know, as a country, right?
Yeah, I mean, something like 25% of all employees are public sector employees, right? So think about how many people are working for government.
Yeah, let's reorganize.
Yeah, like there's got to be more that we can be doing. It's not far off. I think it might be 27%, but it's like huge amount of Canadian workers are government workers. And we're not.
Which is fine if they were actually deployed effectively.
Right. Well, you know, so there's a big controversy in Toronto right now, which is, to my chagrin, is dying in the news cycle. And that is that our parks department, which has thousands of employees, was audited, and we were finding that our parks employees are like, they're doing 2 hours of work a day and sitting in a Tim Hortons parking, right? And that's all. And we're paying these people like $75K to go cut grass, and they're sitting in the Timmy's parking lot. Like, their vehicle GPS is confirming this. It's not, and they're not parked across the street from the park. Like, they're just effing the D all day. And we're going like, okay, so you're spending millions and millions and millions of dollars on these public sector employees, totally overcompensated. And I'm not trying to punch down on working. You know what? If you can get a union job that gets you good money, and I think working people should be able to afford a living and afford a home and all that sort of thing. That's not what I'm saying. But if you're making that kind of money, and where's the value for money for the public? So all that to say, like, we can't even cut our grass efficiently. How are we gonna,
Yeah,
like, we literally can't even cut our grass. How
yeah.
are we supposed to compete with China? Right? They're
It's a
like,
good way. No,
China's,
that's a good way of looking at it.
China's like, oh, you know what we should do? We should build a nuclear powered generating station on the dark side of the moon so we
Yeah.
can go to fucking Mars. And we're like, hey, let's go slag off work and sit in Tim Hortons for 6 hours. That's the top minds in Canada. Crazy.
Well, and I guess this is what's interesting is all of this was seen as working, before the 47th president dropped the gauntlet, that we were, as long as they were buying our oil and our lumber and our steel, we'd turn a blind eye to everything else. And, now that that's over, I think people are really struggling, and kind of shows you how poorly operated this machine has been, because it can't function without its benevolent relationship. Yeah, it's interesting to watch it unfold. But you're right that, and I've talked about this a bit, about this flat hierarchy, and this idea of creating these entrepreneurial groups, and that what you just described is a really good version of that I'm okay with paying people an above average living wage with benefits and pensions, and, like, I have no problem with the compensation, but what I have a problem with is how it's led. So I don't even blame the guy sitting in the truck at Tim Hortons. It's actually the leadership model, is the governance model, is the one that I really want to go after. And so if you actually said to those guys, you're going to go and you're going to operate a private for-profit social enterprise, nonprofit hybrid, and we're going to second in this entire workforce to that group, and and you're going to keep your government paychecks, but now you're going to go out and run it more entrepreneurial. I'd love to run that experiment, and I know there'd be opposition to it, but it's like, those are the kind of things we should be experimenting with, to say, or I mean, how hard is it to go ask that guy Tim Hortons? It's like, tell me what you would do differently, and he'd be like, oh well, I would start doing this, this, and this. Okay, let's do that. Like, now everybody's just kind of not wanting to deal with anything, right, until they get fired. And unfortunately, it's always the person at the bottom of the food chain that feels the pain, not the person at the top.
Yeah, it's a great idea to be able to incentivize employees and even get a piece of any cost savings or profits. And they feel, I think it's exceptionally demoralizing to not be fully, I think a lot of people, not all people, to not be contributing and doing their best or doing more.
That's what I say. It's you can't blame the work. You can't blame the worker. It's the leadership is the issue. But yeah, I don't think so. Privatization isn't the solution. It's this idea of seconding public servants working for hybrid nonprofit social enterprises, right? Like, there's a better model that's sitting there waiting for someone to experiment with. And even if it's not perfect or needs a lot of, somebody's got to start eventually, right? Yeah. So why is Carney putting a bunch of money into Atlantic Canada? Why is he only interested in strategic industries?
What's broken down for Atlantic Canada?
Say that again.
What's broken down for Atlantic Canada? What do they have listed?
Seems to be a lot around the seafood industry. So they're putting all the money through their, their regional development agencies like FedNor and PacCan and all these groups. So that doesn't help because that is total PR money. And a lot of workforce training, income support, Buy Canadian. So 80 million for Atlantic Canada to, just basically seafood. Seems to be a lot about seafood. So again, that just tells me it's all politically motivated. We're still not working on the right issue. And then that major projects office, I feel like that was just to placate the Albertans. Hiring an oil and gas exec to run it. I feel like I'm getting too cynical, but I keep thinking it's all justified, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, and I don't think you are.
It's just the status quo is gone, and they're still hanging on to something that doesn't even exist anymore.
Well, let's wrap it up then. If that's all there is, carry on with their days.
All right, enjoy your meditation.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Good seeing you again, Simon. I'll be back in the seat next Wednesday without all this noise. So we'll see you guys then.
Enjoy your drive.
Thanks.
See you,
Appreciate the
Simon.
conversation, folks. Thanks. Take care.
Yeah,
Have a good
see you,
day.
Simon.